I'm nervous about today's book, Mike,
How so?
because there's a comment made at the very beginning of the book that I think could potentially nullify the entire book. There's a teaser, but we can't go there yet.
Nope. We got to talk about workout stuff.
That we do. So, I guess the big question is, did you work out?
Yes, I did. You want me to go through mine first?
I'll go first here. So, I did do workouts, I think 10 times since we had our last episode, which is saying something for me. I'm normally not that on top of it, but I did every weekday. I've done a workout, and I did one of the body weight workouts from Nerd Fitness.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done that every morning. It's been super helpful. I'm a fan of that one. It's been good.
Cool.
So yes, I've been doing it. Been doing the thing.
All right. Well, while you were going Nerd Fitness, I was going full Jocko.
Jiu-jitsu?
No, not jujitsu, but I had a couple different action items from the previous episode, and they were all around reconfiguring my workout routine at home.
Okay.
First one was to start working out in the morning as like part of my morning routine, to do a little bit of a workout, quick little things that I could do. And he had a bunch of examples and also a bunch of recommended gear. So part of that also was getting up earlier. I am trending in the right direction here, still not where I want to be, but I think my target wake-up time is going to be 6 a.m. I've adjusted my bedtime earlier so that that's definitely feasible. The last one was to consider my home gym purchases, and this is why I say I went full Jocko. This is completely Awful Otter's fault.
All right.
But I have a Concept 2 Model D rowing machine in my bedroom now.
Nice work.
I started looking at rowing machines, and they vary quite a bit in price. The cheap ones are a couple $100. And there's lots of those on Amazon, and they've got like 3.5-star reviews, 4-star reviews, which tells me they're probably good enough, but there's going to be something about them that just isn't what you want.
Right.
Then the step up from that is the Concept 2 Model D, which is about $900. And you actually cannot buy it right now.
Oh, interesting. Why is that? I suppose a lot of people buying this sort of thing.
Yeah, everybody's buying home workout gear. So if you go to the website and try to buy it directly, they say join the waiting list, and every week they send you an update on your spot in the queue. And so I did that when I finally came to grips with the fact that I was going to want to get a decent one if this is going to be something I was going to do for a while.
Sure.
My wife was really excited about it too. She had used the rowing machine at the gym, and this is actually the one that they had there. So she was looking for something that would help her establish a good workout routine at home too. So it's a worthwhile investment since we're both going to be using it consistently. And then the list that once I signed up on it, they sent me the update. Okay, your spot in the queue is going to be available to purchase on March 4th.
Nice.
It's like 8 weeks out. And in the meantime, I was looking around on the web, see if I could find it somewhere. Rogue Fitness sells it, but it's always out of stock. All the places that would normally have it, you can't get it off of Amazon. The listing is there, but you can't get it off of Amazon. You go on eBay and they're selling for twice as much as they do retail just because you can't get them anywhere.
Sure.
You can even buy, people are on that waiting list, you can buy the link in order to buy the machine off of eBay for like $40. But then randomly I checked Rogue Fitness and they must have just gotten like a big shipment of them in. I'm like, hey, weird, this is available now. And so I bought one. It came. I figured it was going to be one of those things where like when it comes in and when it's available, then we'll ship it to you. But it shipped the same day and it came 2 days later.
I don't think I would complain. Like,
no, not at all.
Throw a party, celebrate.
Yeah. Well, I really should have dragged my feet a little bit more because a really incredible Bookworm listener offered to give me a rowing machine after I had already received the Concept 2, which I was kind of blown away by. I don't think it would have worked out anyways, because I think they thought I was closer to you than I am. They offered to deliver it themselves. I don't think they realized how far out of a drive that would be, but a phenomenal offer. I did not expect anything like that. It's kind of blown away by it. So yeah, I do have a rowing machine now, and I've been using it a couple times a day. Our buddy Josh has one too. He texted me. He's like, I was listening to Bookworm. You need to get this one. Just don't even look at anything else. I'm like, well, that's good because it's coming tomorrow.
I'm glad you've not changed your mind and said, don't ever buy this one.
Yeah. But he had told me, don't go hard at the beginning because you're not used to the workouts. You will be in really sorry shape the next day if you do it. Just stick to like 5 minutes at a time.
Sure.
So that's what I've been doing. 5 minutes in the morning, part of a morning workout, 5 minutes in the evening usually. And it's awesome. I love it. Never thought I would be rowing guy, but here I am.
I know I've talked to a handful of folks since that episode about rowing, and people seem to love this thing.
Yeah.
Like this thing called rowing. I don't understand it, of course. You have jumped in head first now, so yeah, I don't get it. But people who are into it are really into it, it seems.
It's a pretty phenomenal workout. It works a bunch of different muscle groups. It burns a ton of calories, and you can like put your phone above the little computer sort of a thing and watch YouTube videos while you do it.
Sure.
So once you build up some endurance anyways, you can kind of get lost in it, and it's a really good workout in a short amount of time.
Sure.
It's also low impact, so it's kind of the opposite of running for me.
Yeah.
Which is probably a good thing. Yesterday I went for a run, and then I came back and I used the rowing machine. That just about knocked me out for the rest of the day.
Nice. Do two different types of workouts in the same day, back to back, and pay for it later.
Yeah. Also, while talking to Josh, he convinced me that I should get a kettlebell. So I have ordered a kettlebell. It has not arrived yet, but I know that Jocko is a big fan of the kettlebells. Reading the book, I wasn't sold on it. Talking to Josh, I am. So there's a 35-pound kettlebell on its way to me. I just bought the cheap Amazon Basics one because I'm not sure if I got the right size. I'm not sure if I want to get multiples. There's some adjustable ones. There's lots of different options. I was kind of blown away at all the different options there are for kettlebells. Like,
yeah,
it's a piece of metal with a handle. Like, what's... But no, you can get rubberized, you can get different coatings.
Like anything in the fitness world, there have got to be 1,200 different versions of every hunk of metal that you're going to pick up and throw around.
Yep. So I bought the cheapest one. I also bought a pull-up bar. So I have this pull-up bar. I can put a link to the exact one in the show notes for people who are interested in it. It's an Iron Age pull-up bar. It clips onto the top of a door frame, and then it goes underneath, and then there are pads that push into the door like at a 90-degree angle. So it's not like you're hanging on the top of the door frame. The way that it distributes the force, it's actually pushing like against the door frame itself.
Yeah.
Instead of downward, you're pushing out, if that makes any sense.
Sure.
So it's kind of crazy, and it's got a padded bar. It's got wide grips, so you can do a couple different types of pull-ups. I have it. My office door is closed at the moment because we're recording, but most of the time during the day I have that open and I have that bar just hanging there.
Sure.
It's high enough. I'm not going to hit my head on it or anything. I'm pretty short. But every time I go in and out of my office, I do a couple of pull-ups. So I don't know what that adds up to, 10, 20 pull-ups a day.
Doesn't matter. That's kind of what is it? Bruce Lee used to do that all the time. He was always moving, always doing some form of resistance workout almost all day. Like, always had some form of movement that he was doing. Obviously did well for him. So,
yep.
I don't think I could argue with that.
I'm not Bruce Lee yet anyways.
No offense. You got some work to do, Mike.
It's true.
That one will take a while.
I'm not sure I ever really aspire to get there.
Sure.
But I like the adjustments that I've made. I feel like this stuff is really gonna stick. So
sure. Well, let's jump into today's book, because I feel like there's a lot of things we could say about this. So I feel like this is one of those that's going to be at risk of being long. So let's dive in. So today's book is The Organized Writer, How to Stay on Top of All Your Projects and Never Miss a Deadline, Antony Johnston. And the very first thing I have to say about this is he spelled organized wrong.
He's British. He spelled it right.
He still spelled it wrong. Totally spelled it wrong. Every time I type it into something, it tries to correct it. I'm like, he spelled it wrong. Anyway, I digress. So yes, this book is one that
I think we need Rosemary Orchard to weigh in on this.
For sure. I have to say this is not what I expected. This is not the book I expected to be reading, and I am very conflicted with it at the moment.
Really?
Yeah, I am. It's not. I'll say this. So my expectation, and we'll see how this holds up as we go through the recording today. My expectation that this was that this was going to spend the majority of its time talking about how to manage ideas and the documents around writing.
So, I mean, this isn't exactly it, but you were thinking more PKM, Zettelkasten, idea management, as opposed to practical task and calendar stuff.
Maybe. The thing that I was hoping to get from it is direction on if I've got 17 different types of written content that I'm working on, what's a good way to keep all of that straight? And you can extrapolate this into that, but it's not point blank. And I thought it was going to be very point blank. And the whole purpose of the book, it is not. I don't think. So it is not what I expected. I'm curious. Did it turn out to be what you expected?
Interesting. Yeah, it was pretty much exactly what I expected.
Okay. Interesting.
That being said, I disagree with some of the stuff in here.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. Given our background and knowing what's in this book.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, we're going to disagree.
I was kind of thinking, he's obviously writing this to a very specific audience. Most of the writers I know them because I got connected to them in the productivity space. So they have the same sort of frame of reference that I do. That's kind of how you and I got connected.
Yep.
But I wonder if the majority of writers, the people that he wrote this for, this is like light bulb revelation to them, because I found myself, especially in the last part of the book when he's talking about the ins and outs of the systems and the different recommendations for hardware and software, I'm like, that is not the best way to do that.
Yeah. There was a point I was flipping through this book and doing kind of my pre-read process. And one of the things, I didn't intend to do this. I don't normally read this before I read a book, but there's a spot in the back for acknowledgments. And just by happenstance, my fingers landed on that. And the very first full paragraph starts with Merlin Mann and David Allen paved the way for, and it doesn't even matter what comes after that. I read that and I thought, oh no, he's going to do that, isn't he? He's going to do that thing where you repeat what other people have said. And the fact that he starts with that in his acknowledgments kind of worried me a little bit. So I came into the book with that concern from the get-go because I had accidentally read that at the end. It's one of those things I always don't want to do, is read the end before you read the beginning, and I accidentally did it.
Well, that'll teach you.
I know. I'm avoiding the back of the book from here on out. I definitely am. So yes, I was a little concerned. We'll go through this, and I think some of what I'm concerned about will come out. But I mentioned as kind of a teaser at the very beginning that there was a comment that I think potentially nullifies a lot of things in this book. And the comment is on page 5. This is in the introduction under a piece for assumptions. And one of the assumptions that he makes of the reader of this book is that the reader is neurotypical. I'm not used to seeing people specifically call that out, but I don't think it's a surprise. I am not neurotypical.
What does that even mean?
it means you're not ADD, basically. That is a term, like I've seen that term all over the place in the world of ADD, and it's referred to as neurotypicals. I think that would be you.
Maybe.
Versus neurodivergents, like myself, who are now medicated because of this.
But where's the line on the spectrum for neurotypical versus neurodivergent?
Where is the line?
Yeah, is it 51% neurodivergent? Now you're this? Like I have trouble with that classification. I get it, neurotypical basically means like you're the normal person. Yep. What is normal?
Correct.
Not me.
And it's not really defined anywhere by anybody, but I do know, like, if you're really far on one side versus the other, it gets easy if you're on one of the ends. If you're somewhere close to the middle, I think it can get a little messy. But my follow-up comment that I wrote in my notebook after that part was, well, this is off to a good start. So take what I've just explained. Like, I saw the Merlin Mann, David Allen thing at the end, which I love both of them. And then I have this neurotypical comment at the very beginning of the book. And there are some spots, and I'll probably bring this up as we go through it. There's some spots in here where he references how to do certain things from a philosophical stance that just would never work for me. And for a lot of people, I know. So it kind of concerned me in that. It's like, okay, yeah, if you can, like, if focus and motivation are not an issue for you at all, what he's saying is spot on. But if those are issues, you need external helps to do the things that he is talking about.
But they are issues for just about everybody that I know.
Yeah, it's a spectrum, right?
So, yeah, does that mean that most people that I know are not who he wrote this for? Could be. I don't know.
I don't either.
I guess I went right over that because it seemed like a ridiculous statement to me at the time. I'm like, well, let's just see what he has to say. Then we'll figure it out.
Right. And that's the way this stuff works too, right? Like, there are a number of times, like, you've had things that stand out. It's like, you can't say that. And it's like, I don't even remember that in there. Is that in there? So yeah, this is where, like, the whole book thing, it strikes people very differently depending on where they're at and what's going on. So anyway, that one stood out to me. It was the only assumption and the only thing in the introduction that I can recall at this point, just because it was such a big thing to me. So yes, the one thing I want to point out here before we jump into the 3 parts of a book, because him being a writer, of course, he needs to have a 3-part book because that's what all editors want, apparently. He does call out in the introduction that he used everything in this book to write this book. And I tend to appreciate whenever authors will say that.
Mm-hmm.
Because then it's not like, here's the thing you should do, but I didn't do it. So it is encouraging that he did follow through on that.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Right.
Joe's not a fan of that.
Totally. Like, you are being disingenuous.
Yep.
All right, so the 3 parts. Part 1 is get organized. It's kind of talking about the concepts, I guess. Well, a little bit more than concepts of what the process of getting organized is. Part 2 is write, which I don't have a whole lot for us on the outline from that one because it seems fairly straightforward. Part 3, non-writing stuff.
This is where things will be interesting.
Yes. The part that I'm not so sure should even be in the book, I think, is where we'll end up spending a decent amount of time.
Well, yeah. So the get organized part, that's kind of where he's talking about the foundations of the system. Then part 2, right? That's really where there's not a whole lot to be said other than to share, like, the steps that he goes through when he's writing. And then part 3, and he mentions this in part 3, that this could be grouped with the first part, but you need to understand the why before you dive into the how. So I think that that makes a lot of sense, honestly.
Yeah.
He also recommends that once you get through reading it, you immediately go back and read it again, which I did not do.
No, I did not either.
And I do think because of the way it's laid out that that's not necessarily terrible advice, because those two parts, part 1 and part 3, could be grouped together. I get why he split them apart, but if you were to follow his advice and go back and reread it again, you would probably get more strong connections between those parts and why he's recommending certain tools and setting things up a certain way when it's right next to part 1, if that makes sense.
Yep. And it would make sense too, because you can kind of go through the why and the concepts here in part 1. You get to the end where you're implementing this process and system, and then you can go back and it'll make more sense once you have things in place. That's a very GTD thing. David Allen says that all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, read the book, put the system in place, and then read the book again.
Yep.
And then you'll be able to pick out all the stuff that you didn't understand in the process of building your system.
And this is very David Allen-esque in the approach of constructing the system, because he has very specific things and very specific ways for you to do things. He's got a 2-day process in part 3 where you empty out everything from your office and you put things back in a specific order to build this system. That's totally what I picture David Allen's coaching looking like. He's just got this checklist in his head, and he's done it so many times that he shows up in somebody's office and he's like, all right, take everything off. Okay, now put this back, and then put this back, and then put this back, and he's walking people through these simple decisions that he's done millions of times. Right. And the fact that he's helping people, holding their hand as they go through it for the first time, they're just like, this is amazing.
Yep, absolutely. So let's jump into part 1 here, get organized. And there are, I don't think I have all of them. Maybe I do have all of them. I don't have chapter 1 here. It's just fasten your seatbelt. He's just prepping you for what's coming in. And I want to jump in here, Mike, in chapter 2.
Real quick, though, with that fasten your seatbelt, because fasten, that is his system in a nutshell.
Sure.
So fasten stands for filing, assistance, say no, time, equipment, and notes. And why he has that at the beginning, having read the rest of the book, I'm not really sure. It makes an appearance back at the end, but I quickly forgot that was in there until I went back and looked at my MindNode file.
I even forgot about it until just this moment. So I was like, I don't really want to, it's all prep work. There's nothing really there worth talking about. But now that you stop me and explain, oh yeah, that is his foundation.
That's his thing. Like that's his own personal stamp on this stuff. Otherwise, a lot of this is just advice that you've heard before if you are coming from it through the productivity lens that we are, and you pick up a couple specific workflow types tweaks that you could do based on his writing experience.
Right. Okay, so where I was trying to go, chapter 2, clocking in and out. This is kind of a section where he has some principles on how to operate in a number of areas. He covers them fairly quickly, which I think is good, but from a fairly high level, and yet there's some practical stuff in here. And let me just read some of the subheaders here, and it'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. So, a day in the life, use your calendar, multiple projects in one day, get smart with email, use a task manager, learn to say no, work to a quantity, not time, productive procrastination, invest the time to set up your system, organize your personal life. Again, organize is spelled wrong. And in the midst of this, like I wrote down a few of these that I want to walk through, but there's a lot in this little I shouldn't say little chapter. It's 58 pages in this one chapter.
That's another thing that kind of bugged me about this book is the chapters are crazy different in terms of length.
They are all over. What was chapter 1 is 8 pages. Chapter 2 is 58 pages.
Yep.
So it's all over the place. Chapter 5 is 14. Like it's just all over. So there is no real consistency in that. But I don't know. That doesn't really bother me a whole lot. Some people, I'm sure it bugs.
It doesn't really bother me in terms of reading it, but it feels a little bit disjointed. It's not like, I guess when I read, I get into a bit of a rhythm or a cadence based on what the author is doing at the beginning of the book. And it was impossible for me to land in that. Where I don't have, I'm going to read X number of pages today. I just sit down and read at the end of the day. And if I'm really digging it, I'll keep reading. Usually one of the points where I make that decision about whether I'm going to keep reading is at the end of a chapter. And so with this one, I'm like, I'm done with a chapter. Should I keep going? Well, I better flip ahead because the next chapter might be 5 pages or it might be 55 pages. And I don't really like leaving off in the middle of a thought. And there are different sections in this chapter, like you mentioned, task management, calendar management, all that kind of stuff. So you could, cut it off at that point and not lose something when you come back to it the next day. But it feels weird doing that when you don't know exactly what is going to be coming. And I feel like it was impossible to predict with this book.
Yeah, I do that too. I wait till I get to like the end of a section before I'll quit reading, and it bugs me if I have to stop and I'm in the middle of a page or something. Like,
yep.
Wait, but then that means I'm going to have to reread the last 3 paragraphs when I come back to it.
Yeah.
Totally like that.
And if I get interrupted during the day, kids need something, I'll put my bookmark in the book and I'll close it. I don't really care. But when I'm going to go to bed at night, like when I'm going from one day to the next, I want to have a solid endpoint there where I can clearly pick it up and start something new without having to go back and read those paragraphs because what I'm about to read is dependent on what they just said.
Right. The first of these sections that I want to cover is calendaring. I think that's one of the tenets of his system here. And this particular little subsection is 15 pages, which is longer than some of his chapters. And the premise of what he's getting at here is putting it onto your calendar what writing project you're working on right now. And I want to point out, getting to this particular point, this book is more geared for long form writing, like book level writing. And my sense is the type of writing that you and I do, you can translate what he's talking about here. But like in my case, if I'm writing an article, generally it's one day. Like I'm going to outline it that morning. I'm going to write the rough draft sometime in the day, and I'm going to publish it that afternoon. Like that is my writing process, which does not fit what he's doing here because he has multiple weeks that he'll block off on his calendar for a given project, which is fine if you're writing a long project like he's doing. And my question to you is, Mike, are you able to calendar writing projects like this, or do you have to do something much different? Because I have to do something very different. I can't do what he's doing.
I'm probably in between you two, to be honest.
Sure.
Because the things that I am writing, I do know weeks ahead of time, this is what I'm going to be writing, and I will work on it for an extended period of time. The difference is that is not the only thing that I am going to be working on. In the past week and a half, I worked on and published an update to the best habit tracking app pick for the Suite Setup, post on the Streaks 6.1 update, which has some really cool stats widgets, and was prepping for and presented a habits webinar. So I prefer when all of those things are related because I can do research and it can translate to different places, but they are not always related to the same topic. And so I do have to slot these things in order to make sure that the content schedule continues to move forward. But I do think that there is a lot of value in his approach. Essentially what he's talking about with this is time blocking. It's just he's blocking off time for one project per day, and I'm doing it for probably 2 or 3 projects per day.
Sure. Yeah, because he does have the section here, multiple projects in one day.
Yep.
And talks about how that's not a normal thing if you want to be successful and that you should really be doing just one.
Well, I guess I'm
per
not a
day.
successful writer then.
At least not at his scale, no. But
Yeah.
but I don't see that as something I'm going to pursue, just because the size of projects that we're talking about, both you and I, are much, much smaller than what he's referencing.
Yeah, there is a lot of stuff in this chapter, though, where he is spot on with how I write. One of the things he mentioned on page 25 is just because we're not typing doesn't mean we're not working. That totally applies to me. A lot of the stuff that I write, it's not, here's a technical breakdown of all of the features in a specific application. I prefer to figure out what is the best way to use it and then teach people the workflow for how to implement that thing, or why you should use this specific app, because it's going to create a positive outcome in your life based on what you define as a positive interaction with your technology, not just default to consuming, but using it for creating as one random example.
Sure.
And he also says that contextual lists don't always make sense for writers because you always have your tools with you at your desk. And I feel like he is kind of hitting on one of my problems with GTD and typical task management, is that the contexts are kind of worthless. I think it would make sense if you were working in an office and you were trying to do something on the side, then maybe you've got like work, studio, home, whatever, like those different contexts. But the contexts are really, for me, dependent on my energy levels and really just what I'm inspired by at the moment, which even sounds really terrible when I describe it, because if you were to wait till you feel inspired to write, like, you're never going to write.
Right.
But basically what I'm excited about, that's the thing that I should be writing about. And I try to pick my projects so they are in line with the thing that I'm excited about at the moment, because that's the easiest way for me to constantly be thinking about these things when I'm not writing and I'm making these connections and figuring out, well, what if I did this? Trying that stuff out and then sharing what I've learned through the writing process. But I don't think he provided a very clear explanation of what I should be doing instead.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm going to continue to write by deadlines, which is kind of what he mentions the most writers do. Just stay ahead of your deadlines, which is why he's recommending putting them on your calendar.
Right.
But I don't think I'm going to take his approach of time blocking on the calendar for, this is my project that I'm going to be working on this week, because I'm not going to devote an entire week to one specific project. I can't do that. And I'm much better off day to day time blocking my day and saying, well, I'm going to work on the webinar for 2 hours here tomorrow, because I know typically in the morning that's when I'm most excited to be doing this stuff. And so if I can kind of align my motivation and my energy with the tasks that I've got, save the admin stuff for the afternoon, that kind of thing, then I'm going to get a lot further.
It is impossible for me to really do any form of time blocking or calendaring of projects like he's referring to. This morning is a good example. Like, one of the concepts we'll talk about in the next part when we get there is writing immediately in the morning. And I had intentions of doing some of that this morning and ended up needing to help install a TV in a classroom. And that is not what I expected to be doing. I came back from that to resume my intention and had to go help someone else with an email problem. Then I had a network problem, and then the writing never happened. And that is a fairly common experience for me. So some of what is predicated with this book is you have full control over your schedule for the most part. Even people who have full control over the schedule have meetings with superiors and such that come up that they can't control. So that stuff does happen. Mine is simply significantly higher than what his is. So like, that foundation is so different that it's impossible for me to do that sort of thing. I can do a lot of calendaring when it comes to meetings and events. Like that one I can do. But when it comes to blocking time for me to do things, it doesn't really work. Unless I have somebody else involved with the work that I'm doing, it has the opportunity of being interrupted by someone else, just by the nature of the job that I do. So saying that, I think if I was in his shoes, if I had I shouldn't say a bunch, if I have 1 to 2, maybe 3 big projects, writing projects that I was working on, and that is where my income was derived, this system would probably work really well. I don't think I would argue with that as far as this calendaring piece goes. But I can't do it. That's all I'm saying.
I don't know anyone who could, to be honest. Not the people in the circles that we run in anyways. There are probably people who can, and maybe he means to write this for that very specific audience, but that's not exactly what I anticipated when I saw this book making the rounds and people talking about it on social media and stuff like that. The people who were raving about it were in that other category where, kind of like you, they don't have complete control over their entire day and they're not working on one thing at a time. So there is a little bit of a mismatch there, I feel like, going into it in terms of the expectations. I don't think it's irreconcilable. I think you can take pieces of it, but you're right that you can't probably just follow it to the letter like he's telling you to, but it's written like you're supposed to follow it to the letter like he's telling you to.
I want to move on to email, but I want to read the beginning of this section on email because I'm about to trigger Mike. All right, here you go. You ready for this? An email arrives. You read it and realize it contains some form of request or instruction that means you now have 1 or more new tasks to carry out. What do you do? If you're an organized writer, you mark it unread and move on to the next email. This is how the section on email begins. And then he then proceeds to explain how you set aside time to deal with these unread emails and complete these actions and to use your inbox. Explicitly explains how to use your inbox as a task list.
Yeah, I remember that part.
I read this and I thought, I bet Mike is going to adopt this 100%. I am sure he will.
When it comes to being organized, he is terribly disorganized regarding email. He has 3 broad categories of email, but there are 4 things that you can do with it. You can read and archive, you can deal with it now, you can deal with it later, or you can ignore and delete. Also, skip ahead to the back of the book and look at his recommended email software applications. There is one, Gmail on the web. Okay, so...
This is in the appendix? Is this where...
No, this is appendix. Chapter...
Oh, that's what you're talking about.
7?
Got it.
Yeah,
I'm with you.
He goes through all the different types of categories, and I wrote down all of the apps that he recommends. Note takers, he talks about Notes, OneNote, Simple Note, Google Keep, Calendar, Fantastical, which he spells wrong, BusyCal.
What?
Yeah, he spells it with a capital C. Fantastical.
Oh, he totally did.
Yeah. And then he gets into spreadsheets, local and cloud backup and archiving. And most of these recommendations, I can tell there's some that he has used and he's putting them in here. And then he's just trying to cover all of his bases. He grabs a couple Windows recommendations from a Google search and throws them on the list. I hate these types of lists. They are worthless. But look at the email app section. He's like, there's lots of email apps out there. I just use Gmail on the web. Okay, well, this is not the person to be listening to when it comes to how to handle an abundance of email.
I got a kick out of it. This section on email, though, like I am not good about maintaining inbox zero the way it's been interpreted. It's not the way you see it out there. Even the way he explains it here is not the way Merlin Mann intended it. That's a story for another day. But I don't follow the processing of getting inbox 0, I tend to leave things there from time to time. But that's partially because I don't need the email now. I don't need to act on it right now, but I will in 4 days. And the easiest thing for me to do is just leave it in the inbox, and then 4 days later when I'm done with it, then I deal with it. That's what I do. So I regularly have 30, 40 emails sitting in that inbox.
That's completely fine.
But very rarely are they unread.
Well, that isn't completely fine.
They're not unread. I don't mark them unread and move on. I just know that they're there, and I go back to them when I need them.
Yeah. And then, so you're an organized writer then.
Totally. I'm good at this.
Yeah, I think when it comes to inbox 0, there's a lot of misconceptions about it. And if I were to give people one piece of advice when it comes to email, it is do email on your own terms. So you don't have to get to 0 messages every day. And in fact, that is not what I do. About once a week, I clear everything out. And that's going to tick some people off. I have a request in my email currently. It's not staying in my email. It's a task inside of Roam at the moment. But there it is. To present at a Mac user group. Okay, well, I didn't see that email for a week because it's not coming from a sender that I had interacted with before. And I'm sorry, but if you want an instant response to an email like that, then I'm not your guy. And be okay with that. You know, that's something I do want to do. I would love to present to that group. And I love contributing to the Apple community. It's been a really cool place for me. It's given me a lot, so I feel like I want to give back, and I feel like I could do a good job, and I could help out the folks that are a part of that group in whatever topics they had presented. But if you're trying to nail it down and get some details from me right away, then I've got other things that are more important, and that's one of the things he mentions here is that you don't owe strangers a reply. You may want to reply to everybody like that, but ultimately they are still a stranger at this point, or at least they're not a prioritized individual. David Sparks and I talked about this on Focus not too long ago about the input workflows and where do all the inputs come from. And email is a big one. And we actually walked through like how we deal with the inputs in all these different areas. And there was a common theme when it came to me is like, well, I'm going to be annoying to people who aren't part of my circle, but I'm going to check it on my terms and I'll get back to you when I feel like it.
Yeah.
And I feel that comes across even in a podcast like this as a little bit, people maybe are offended that, well, Mike can get away with that, but I can't. But I think everybody can move a little bit more in that direction. We have this picture in our heads a lot of times of like, I don't want to let anybody down. And I want to be looking for those new opportunities all the time. And I don't want to miss something. And so you compulsively go check to see if there is something new there, but there is a lot of value in just saying no to the things that you don't know are there and focusing on the thing that you do know you need to do, which is kind of part of his fasten system, but he doesn't talk a whole lot about that say no part.
You'll probably be upset with me for this, but I do tend to leave my email open all day anymore. Some accounts and not others. So there are probably 3 different levels of accounts for me. Some that I check only once a week. I don't leave those open all day, every day. I have some of my like online based emails that I'll run through maybe once or twice a day. But my day job work, I have open all day. Now, I say that, and yet the way that I use my computer, I usually can't see it, and I don't have alerts on. So if I'm working on something, I have no idea if an email came in. It's not like I've got it over on the corner of a monitor and can see it at all times. I've been playing around. I've got a Stream Deck that I've been using from Elgato, and I have a button on there that I put on that's hide others. If you're familiar with this, if you go like on a Mac, if you go up and hit whatever the program is and go down, you can hide others, like everything but that program. I love to do that, especially if I'm writing on something or working on a presentation or something. The stuff is still open. I just can't find it. Like it's not visible to me. So I do tend to have it open, but it's usually not right in front of me. But I would easily say I check it 10, 12 times a day. But that's
there you
because...
go. That's then I would argue that the hide all isn't working.
Sure. But keep in mind, like, I'm moving around so much. Like, for example, this morning I probably checked it 7 or 8 times, but that was because I had a lot of things that were in between. I'm waiting on some information to be able to finish some stuff I've got to have done for 2 days from now. So it's like, is it here yet? Can I go do that task yet? Nope, it's not. Okay, I'll go on to the next thing. So, like, that's a lot of what I have going on. If I've got a funeral tomorrow that I'm running tech for, generally I'm waiting on a bank of pictures, lyrics, all sorts of stuff. I'm waiting for stuff, and that all comes in via email from people I don't know. So that's a lot of why. But if, for example, if I'm doing editing on a video project, it's not uncommon for me to be there 2.5, 3 hours on that and never have anything else open. And those days I'd probably check it maybe twice. So it changes. It depends on the day.
Which is really the problem, because the days that are nuts are the days when you're not finding the time to sit down and write, because your brain is already constantly used to jumping from one emergency to the next. And as soon as you get done with one, you're like, well, I better go check my email and see if there's something else. And at that point, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, what do you know? There's something else that I should be dealing with right now.
That's the difference. It's not like I'm not checking it to see if there's something else. It's if I've got the thing I need to do a different task. Because I regularly will find new emails in there that I just don't even bother opening whenever I do that. So if new emails come, I usually don't pay any attention to them until I need them or I have time later on. It's only when I'm waiting on things, but that happens a lot. But also keep in mind, yes, I'm jumping from fire to fire, but that's my job.
Yep. No, I get that. And I'm not trying to paint this as like Joe's fault, but this is the humans, the general humans problem.
Yep.
Is that the crazier things get, the more you are in reactive fight versus flight mode. So the thing that leads to that is also the thing that you gravitate towards when things get a little bit nuts. If you were able to disconnect from your email on those days that you've gone from one emergency that you got to fix to the next emergency that you got to fix, eventually those emergencies that you got to fix are going to be done. And at that point, you might have the time for your writing. But the average person at that point is like, well, I better go check my email. And at that point, you see a whole bunch of things that are urgent to other people. And it's very easy to say, well, I don't want to be the guy that no one can rely on. So I'll just do this right now. And then you do that again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And pretty soon, the entire day is gone.
Yep.
And you didn't get to your writing.
But here's the other key too. And I'll point this out because I've done this sort of thing long enough to know like how to handle email, in my opinion, appropriately for me, in that if it's an emergency, they're not sending me an email. Like I've done this long enough that if it's a true emergency, they're not emailing me. They've called me, they've come found me, they have done something, because if they email me about an emergency, they know they can't rely on a quick response for that. Because there are days when I get focused on working on a couple of things. Maybe I'm doing some writing, maybe I'm doing some video work, maybe I'm recording with somebody, and it's going to be the next day before you get a response from me. So I've told people over and over again, if you need a quick thing from me, call me, come find me. Do not email me. So they know that. So I know that I don't generally have fires that need put out in my email. So I'm never going to be the one who's solving a problem when someone else could, if it's an email. But that's not necessarily something that everyone listening to this is going to be able to have.
Yeah.
Like that's a whole mindset and culture that I've kind of built around how do you work with Joe, and have been working on that for years. So it's not something that I could just say, you can just do this too. It takes time to kind of build that up around all the people who are who work with you.
Mm-hmm.
Is this making sense?
Yep. And that's a worthwhile discussion if it needs to be had. Have that that talk about this is how you work with me. But I would argue everyone should think about how they can move that needle in the direction that they want it to go.
Right.
Because it's easy to just default to whatever anybody else is doing. If you have to go back and forth with somebody about a file that they're sharing with you for a funeral tomorrow, you can say, because there's going to be some back and forth on this and you're going to want some immediate feedback, here's my cell number, text me.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't just
That's exactly what I do.
Constantly check the email. I wonder if they sent it yet. I wonder if they sent it yet. I wonder if they sent it yet. And I know that you do that kind of stuff, but most people don't.
Yeah. If it's multiple days out, or like if it's on a deadline, for example, take the funeral example, which this is kind of morbid to be talking about a funeral. I probably shouldn't have said it that way, but it's very common for me to 3 or 4 days prior to that moment, I've gotten an email from the family. I know what their expectation is of the end result, but they have a lot of questions around what file formats, what method do I get it to you? Do I need to drop off a thumb drive? Can I send you a link? They have all kinds of questions, and rightly so. They've never worked with me in that sense, so they don't know what to do. And I always just, here's my phone number, call me. We can talk through this whenever it's convenient for you. Call me whenever it's convenient for you, and I will do what I can to help you as best I can. I generally get a phone call within 20 minutes, and we talk it through. I tell them I got to have it sometime morning of or the day before, preferably, so I can set it up before the event.
Yep.
And it's that day or the day before that I'm like, I've checked in with them. They know they're sending it to me, but I don't have it yet. And I'm going to be leaving in 2 hours. And I need this file so I can go work on it now, or I'm going to have to come in early the next day to do it. That's the moment that I'm generally checking more often than not.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense.
Anyway, email. Don't trust this guy's email methods. I don't agree with. I mean, there's a lot of things that I do that are what he's talking about that are bad. I'm not arguing with that, but I generally have a lot of background to where mine's a little different than normal, even different than what he's explaining. Anyway, anything else you want to say about email, Mike?
No, let's go on to the next topic, which is maybe just as bad.
It could be just as bad. Yes, task management. And his favorite task manager is?
Things.
He's a Things fan. And it made me hurt a little bit when he said that OmniFocus was too much for him.
It is.
Come on.
It is. I totally get where he's coming from. He's absolutely right in the appeal of something like Things. That being said, Things is not the task manager that I would just blanket recommend for every single writer, but the reasons that he likes it are absolutely spot on, and they've done a phenomenal job of making a beautiful application that doesn't feel complicated. With OmniFocus, even though it doesn't have to be complicated, it still feels complicated a lot of times because you got to understand some of the killer features that it has, like the review thing. Like there is no review in in Things. And for somebody like Antony Johnston, that's completely fine. GTD purists are going to balk at that, but is what it is. I like his differentiation here between the task manager and the to-do list, though. Sean Blanc described this in the All the Things course as the brain versus the list, and I thought this was absolutely genius, and this is kind of what I've done with keeping everything inside a room and then writing it out on my notebook every single day when I plan my day the night before, is the task manager. Basically, that's the piece that's using all the fancy stuff to help you identify these are the things that you should be thinking about for tomorrow. And I would recommend that you do this the night before, not the day of. I don't think he made that distinction, but that's a really important point. And then you jot everything down into a list, and that's basically a short temporary checklist of things that you're going to be doing. This has been really great for me. And I know that there are ways to do this inside of a task manager, but separating those two has kind of been transformational for me in the way that I get stuff done. Feels a lot better to work this way, in my opinion. So I think this approach makes a lot of sense and people should think about this.
Yeah, this kind of, for a lot of people, this is interpreted into a hybrid system. I think yours is the same, where your to-do list is on paper and the task manager handles kind of the cold storage of, if you will, of projects. He does point out that a paper-based system like this is not worth your time because you have to carry a notebook with you everywhere. And then he talks about later about how he carries a notebook with him everywhere. And I'm like, what gives?
He specifically calls out bullet journals, like, don't do that.
Yeah. I was like, buzz off. But anyway, I of course took exception with that. But I get his point. I get what he's saying. It syncs in the cloud. It always backs up. It's like all these things, but I don't have to charge my bullet journal. I will say that. Anyway, he does talk quite a bit about task management. I don't know what else to say about it other than he just encourages you to keep track of things in some form. Like that's ultimately what he's getting at here, which I think all of us would agree with, given knowledge-based work in any form. The work isn't visible in front of you, so trying to keep track of it becomes necessary.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that this task manager versus to-do list, or the brain versus the list, that becomes even more important when you add additional projects and you're not able to just pick one thing to work on every day like he recommends. So I think he doesn't get into a lot of details here because his needs are pretty basic, but the format that he's talking about here, I think, is important as you scale the number of things that you're trying to get done.
The next section here is work to a quantity, not time. And this one's very straightforward as far as like what he means. He's talking about set an amount of writing that you're going to do. Don't set the amount of time you're going to work on something. So instead of saying, I'm going to spend 2 hours working on this project, say, I'm going to write 1,500 words on this project. And I get that. I do. Too much of my time is time-based, of course. So I don't know how I would do that. Because it's very different. Sometimes it's scripting, sometimes it's outline, sometimes it is an article. And they're very different in the amount of time that it takes to complete the entirety of the project. And I know roughly how long that will take me to do. I don't disagree with him. If I was writing a novel, I would absolutely do this. Like, I'm going to put 1,500 words on the document every day until it's done. Like, I would totally do that if I had the ability to set my schedule and dictate it like that. I would totally do it. But again, in my personal life, I don't think that's going to fit real well.
Well, you may not disagree with him, but I will.
All right, fair enough.
So I agree that this is a good approach if you are a professional writer who can charge large sums for your writing. You are not worried about finances, and you are not worried about how long something takes. Basically, if you have unlimited resources, this is a great approach. Most people do not have unlimited resources. And so I think this is dangerous. My own personal experience, the thing that got me into what I'm doing today was establishing a writing habit. I literally just did a webinar yesterday as we record this on habits. One of the things that I told people when it comes to developing habits, and writing may very well be a habit for somebody who works a 9 to 5, but they want to write something on the side, that's a great way to do it. You establish a writing habit. The number one tip I would give that person, don't pay attention to how many words you're writing. Show up every day. That's the only thing that matters. Did you write at all? That's what matters. When I was writing my book, I got up early and spent an hour a day before I went into the office writing, and I was not worried about word counts. Had I been worried about word counts, now all of a sudden, each one of those writing sessions, I have either succeeded or I have failed because I have to stop at a specific time. And so it's kind of, I'm agreeing with you that is when you have to work within a specific time frame, this doesn't work. But I also think that for the majority of people, that's going to be the way to do it anyways, is just, did you check the box on making an effort to do the thing, not keeping track of your prolific output? There is a switch that gets flipped there when this is the sole thing that you do for a living. If you're trying to work on one specific project, like a novel, and you have all day, every day to do this, then yeah, I probably would take the approach that he takes. But even if that was my only job and everything else about my life is the same, where I've got 5 kids and a wife at home who are here with me, I'm still not going to take this approach. I'm still going to time block stuff, and I'm going to put parameters around how I'm investing my time, because my time is my most valuable resource and I don't want to spend it all working.
Yeah, I think it's valid. I do. But again, like you and I are in a situation where we have so much time that we can put towards it. Like I have a tendency to write over lunch breaks and stuff. Well, that's a limited time frame. I've got 30 minutes. And if I want to kick out a 500-word article, guess what? The keys continue to press the entire time.
Yep.
So it's not going to allow me to change the amount of time that I'm using to put those 500 words down. I am going to get them out. That's really all it is. So anyway, I think it's different depending on where you're at in the situation, for sure.
Yep.
The next section here, I feel like I understand and yet I don't understand. And I do what he talks about very differently. But chapter 3 is taking notes and making lists. The first piece of this that's of interest to me is the note-taking and ideas section. This is where this whole, dare I say, nonsense of Zettelkasten and linking of notes and ideas comes in.
How dare you?
He doesn't call it that. He doesn't refer to a Zettelkasten. He does not refer to trying to tie notes together. What he does refer to, though, is the idea of having some form of ubiquitous capture, to use the term, and having it with you at all times, and transferring those into some form of a digital note taker, and then spending time developing those ideas when you're doing that transferring. And that piece, I think I need you to correct me if I'm wrong here, but that piece of spending time developing notes and ideas in a dedicated note-taking system is exactly what I would expect a writer to tell me. Is that fair?
A creator, but yeah.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's why the Zettelkasten stuff and the PKM stuff is taking off right now, is there is an emphasis on creating. One of the people that I follow online, because I like what they are producing around this topic at the moment, is Ness Labs. And she's actually got a course called Collector to Creator. And I feel like all of the Zettelkasten type stuff, the PKM type stuff, is right now all of the backlink type stuff that's coming to Craft and Notion and every other app that you can think of. It's designed to get you from just collecting the information, storing it in a folder somewhere, being able to go back and find it later if you can recall it, to connecting it in a way that is more organic. You can see things, jump between things more easily, and as a result, that makes the creative process easier. And I think there's absolutely value to that. The way that it gets expressed is different. You know, I have a confession to make. I am actually playing with Obsidian at the moment. I like the local storage of things. I'm also playing around with the Hook app. That's kind of the thing that got me.
That one's cool.
Yeah. So I have this Keyboard Maestro macro, which pulls the subject line and the message ID from MailMate and puts it into a markdown link that I could use inside of Roam. But it's a pain in the butt to build that yourself. And I'm seeing other places, local apps that I want to have those sorts of connections. And I'm putting it inside of Roam and I'm clicking on those links and it always opens up a blank tab before opening the application. It drives me absolutely insane.
Nice.
This is a URL to a local thing. You should not be opening up a separate Chrome tab just to open up the mail message. Do that enough and it's driving me nuts. So, I think Obsidian is ultimately where I'll be ending up. I'm also going through a course, Linking Your Thinking, and their recommended app is Obsidian. So as I learn more about it, I'm sure my opinion of it is gonna change. I also have mentioned this from the very beginning. I really don't like the people who make Roam.
Yeah.
One of the things I stumbled across is that this video, I think it's from the Linking Your Thinking guy, that the apps that you use, you don't just influence those apps also influence you. And I think that's absolutely true. I'm not sure I want Connor and the gang influencing me. So I've paid for it. I've got 5 years, but I am looking for the moment when Obsidian can do all the things that I need it to do, and it makes it easy for me to move away from Roam. I don't know when or if that day will come, but I'm playing around with it. So all that to say, Obsidian has a way of doing this. Roam has a way of doing this. Hook has a way of doing this. You don't even have to use those other applications. Craft has a way of doing this. But Hook is interesting because you can literally just grab a link to anything from anything and paste it inside of anything.
Yes.
So now all of these applications, which normally would have been siloed, are no longer in a silo, and you don't have to rely on OmniFocus being the ones to develop the direct integration with the email app that you're using, because you can just use Hook, grab the link to the message, and drop it inside of your task manager. And I don't know a whole lot about Hook. I'm kind of playing around with this too, but there's all this to say there are tons of options for this sort of thing, and this is absolutely valuable. This is where the productivity space is going. I'm going to call it right now. And you can call it a Zettelkasten. You don't have to call it a Zettelkasten, though. I think there's a lot of stuff that right now people would define as like, oh, well, that's a Zettelkasten, but it's just going to become ubiquitous with, no, that's a productivity app because it ties with other things and you can use it in different ways. And it's all around this idea of idea management and not just collecting these dots, but how do you express them?
I'm not using one of these things. Because here's the thing, like my view on what becomes content and what are the things that I release has been changing somewhat. And if you pay attention to what I've been doing over the last probably 6 to 9 months, it's become more and more of here's something that's on my mind. Let me tell you about it. Here is something I'm learning how to do right now. Let me tell you about it. That's a lot of what I've moved to, which means the concept of trying to gather an idea and further it to a point to where I'm comfortable sharing it, I don't do that. It's pretty much all hot takes. And to me, there's a lot less stress involved with that. If I have an idea for something, it gets like a new line item in my bullet journal for when it could become something, but I don't develop it. I just think about things. And if it's something that I feel like I've thought about long enough that I'm willing to put together formal thoughts on, then I sit down and I put it together and release it like all in one day. So like that's what I do. I don't do a lot of this, build it over time and then release it, which is partly why I have a hard time grasping what people do with Roam and Obsidian and Gang, and it doesn't resonate with me. I get how it does. I'm not telling other people not to do that. In most cases, there are cases where I tell people don't do that, but overall, I don't see it as something I'm giving like a blanket statement. Don't ever do this, because I get where there are some. I just think that the group of people who are doing it is much larger than the group of people who should be doing it. That's my opinion. Take it or leave it.
I'm not sure I have time to take that.
Okay, job sheets. Let's talk about job sheets. So the next part of this is this thing called a job sheet. And he's a writer, so he has things like contracts and he has invoices and he's got all sorts of stuff per writing project. He regularly has a manila envelope for that project, and he has this job sheet of sorts that he tapes to the front, and it has like the title of the thing, who the publisher is, who's the agent, what is the fee for it, is there a contract, what else is on here? It has like checks for what part of the process is he in currently, and it's like, do I have the research done? Do I have my notes taken? Do I have the plot figured out? Do I have the breakdown done? Where am I at in the draft process? Has it been published? Is it archived? Has it been paid? All these things, all these check boxes. It's a physical piece of paper he prints and puts on this manila envelope. And I'm looking at this thinking, hey, that's really cool. I'm probably never going to use this. Are you going to use this? I don't think I have anything that this would apply to because my projects are also different.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of these job sheets. I'm a fan of them conceptually. I'm not a fan of them being printed out and taped onto the file folders. I do think there's value in having a checklist of things that you go through for a specific project.
Yeah.
I mean, I have that already, but also I don't have it formally inside of any of my own personal task stuff. A lot of the places that exists is for like writing for the suite setup. We got a couple different tools that we use for like SEO research, and it's not sleazy like I'm going to hack the algorithm. It's just like the Best Habit Tracker app, for example. When I updated that one, I plugged it into this application called usetopic.com, and it gives you a rank based on the keywords that are already there. And then you can look at the other high-ranking articles and the keywords that they're using, and it makes recommendations like, oh, you should say things this way, So it's stuff that I'm already saying, but it helps me say it a little bit more clearly, so you're answering the questions that people have when they type in the search box, what is the best iOS habit tracker? And that's something that's kind of new to my writing process. So having that in a checklist is helpful. Do SEO research. But a lot of the other stuff, like I just kind of flow from one state to the next.
Right.
I'm going to write the text. I'm going to finish the first draft. I'm going to edit the first draft. I'm going to grab the screenshots. I'm going to make any videos that are needed. I'm going to upload all of this stuff to WordPress, and then I'm going to assign it to somebody else to review it before it goes out. And so, I don't know, like I'm not going to do this for my personal stuff. I can see the value of this when you're working with other people, because at any point in the process, you can assign it to somebody else and they can jump in and help you out with something. That's really where I feel the value of this is. I'm not telling people you shouldn't have this kind of checklist inside of things or OmniFocus or whatever your task manager is, but I also don't necessarily think you need it either.
It's just a checklist.
Exactly.
It's just a different form of it. So I use a lot of these as well. So I don't want to belabor that. I just thought it was kind of a cool concept for sure.
Mm-hmm.
All right, part 2. This one we're going to go through fairly quick, I think, is write! Exclamation point. It's 2 chapters in here. Chapter 4 is 5 pages after breakfast. He goes through this whole thing about a clean mind. You haven't had a chance to fill it with messy stuff from social media and relationships and communications throughout the day. You have a clean mind at that point in the day. Do your writing right after breakfast. 5 pages is his quantity, not his time. And he goes as far, like, takes as long as he needs to do those at a minimum of those 5 pages after breakfast. And that's pretty much what I got out of that chapter.
My one action item comes from this chapter, and it's not the 5 pages. It's not a specific amount of words, but I do want to make sure that my morning time is my writing time. I've kind of talked about this sort of thing in the past and probably had an action item sort of like this in the past, but where I'm at right now, I do notice that I can default to some of the admin type stuff, and I want to kind of protect those early morning hours specifically for writing. even if I don't have a specific article that I am working on with a publication date, I want to spend a couple of hours just writing every single morning. And my mornings, the schedules are kind of hit or miss based on meetings and things. So I can't do this every single day, but I think most days I probably could, especially as I'm starting to get up a little bit earlier. Maybe I can't spend 4 hours writing every morning, but I can spend at least an hour writing every morning before I have to jump in and help out with something else that the team has going on. So I think if I could create that habit, it would alleviate a lot of the stress of writing to the deadline that he was talking about in the first section.
Fair enough. Chapter 5 is From Scribbles to Script. And I just have one question for you here, Mike. Did anything in this chapter get you to a point where you thought this would be helpful? I'll explain what it is here in a second.
No, I literally just jotted down the 7 steps that he outlines.
Yeah,
but
so
I'm not writing scripts, so.
Yeah, I mean, it just doesn't make sense to me. I think if I was writing scripts for like a TV show and such, which he does, this would make a lot more sense to me. But I was reading through this, like, I don't even understand what some of this is or why you would do it. But I guess there's a reason. But it's initial notes, initial plot, bullet point outline, treatment and pitch, breakdown, manuscript, rewriting. And a lot of it felt like just expanding on the previous step to me. Like it's just 7 steps of tweaking your draft and expanding it. That's kind of what I saw. It's like, I'm sure it's different than that, but it just felt a lot of like the same stuff.
Yeah, so my process here is a little bit different, and this is where the PKM, Zettelkasten and type stuff adds some value, I think. I get an idea for something and I will capture it. That's kind of like the initial notes. I will then add it to Notion. If it's going to be a TSS article, for example, we'll put it on the publication calendar. And then before I do any sort of writing, I'm going to go through a couple additional steps. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a mind map of the topic, and I'm going to just dump everything that I could think of relating to that particular topic or idea. And that's where all the backlinking stuff really can add some value, because again, it's not just the technical features and things. It's like writing habits, journaling, stuff like that, where I want to be able to go back and look at like the quotes that I've collected and the other insights that I've gotten from the books that we've read on those particular topics and drop those in. That I think adds a lot of value to the stuff that I write. Once I have created the mind map, then I might do some SEO research, and then I will actually write the article.
Sure.
So my points from scribble to script are looking very different than his.
Yeah.
But I follow this process basically when I write things. So I think if you haven't ever had a process for your writing, this is a good place to start. However, you're probably going to change some of the specifics.
Or a lot of it, yeah.
Yep.
For sure. Okay, part 3, non-writing stuff. The first of those, of the 2 main two chapters in here, are Money Matters, or it is Money Matters. Hire an accountant, how I learned to stop worrying and love the spreadsheet, invoicing, find your price, and stick to it. The only one I really want to cover here, because like I get it, like if you have the money, hire an accountant. I don't think anybody would argue with you on that. Invoicing, yep, it's a process. You got to do it immediately. Raise your price, stick to it, don't back off of it. I mean, those are all fairly straightforward things you would say to anybody who runs a business of sorts. The spreadsheet one is the one I just was curious about, because I do, like, coming from a data background, like spreadsheets, I can look at them and run with them all day long. And it's not an issue for me to use those. I actually just shared one on Twitter. Who was that? Matt Casanelli was asking for a shareable spreadsheet, so I dumbed down my business budget spreadsheet and shared it with him. And it seemed like it was what he was after. But anyway, I tend to run a fair number of spreadsheets for accounting and finances and stuff with my business. It doesn't mean that it runs well, but it at least means I know what's going on. Do you do anything like this? Like, my wife and I have a personal budget that we, well, theoretically have up to date. We're not now, but we have a spreadsheet that we use for this because I can never find apps that do the sort of thing that I feel like basic budgeting should do. But I'm curious, do you do anything with spreadsheets, Mike? I feel like what you do probably doesn't require that much.
No, and he talks about the different categories for the spreadsheets. I do keep track of my expenses. I usually just print off the receipt as a PDF, save it to my desktop with EX for expense, space, the date, and then the company that that the receipt is from. Save it as a PDF, got a Hazel rule then, which takes that and automatically files it in a Dropbox folder for the year under tax info. So when we do give everything to the accountant at the end of the year, it's really easy to just add all that stuff up.
Sure.
I also use FreshBooks. I've been using it for years for like the one-off stuff that I do. There's not a whole lot of that anymore, but I do still contribute to the Screencast Online monthly magazine. So it's just easy to, whenever I need to send somebody an invoice for something that I did, use FreshBooks. And then when you get a payment, you mark it as paid, export the reports at the end of the year, stuff like that.
Sure.
But that's it, because the rest of the stuff that I get paid for doesn't require me to send an invoice for it.
Sure.
Like the relay stuff for Focused and the ads, I just get payments in PayPal whenever the companies who took out the ads pay their invoices. So they handle that stuff and then they send it to me, and I don't have to worry about managing that.
Yeah. I don't know what else to say about it. Spreadsheets. I mean, if you want to keep track of things, it's a good way to do it. You know, the spreadsheet I use for my business lets me just copy paste all of the transactions from the last month, and I can just paste it in and it auto populates based on a whole bunch of stuff, because spreadsheet formula nerdery going on. So I do a lot of that, but I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So I automate an awful lot of it. So anyway, spreadsheets. Chapter 7, it's a setup.
Man, is it a setup?
Yeah, it is. There's 6 sections in here. Take a weekend. He's talking about taking a weekend to set up your system. And relax is the next section. Take a break afterwards. Hardware, software, taxonomy, and gadgets. The 3 that I think we would be interested in covering is hardware, software, and gadgets. And I know that we've talked about some of this already, so I don't want to go too deep in the specifics of what he's recommending. I'm more curious about like what he's doing here, because like with hardware, he's talking about you need a backup drive. Guess what? You need a computer. Guess what? You need a notebook. Like, I really didn't understand why it needed to be like, because you don't have to tell writers they need a computer. Okay, like I get that. The software piece I kind of understand, but the hardware one I just did not. Like, why is this even here? Did I miss something in this?
Well, with the hardware, I don't think the focus is on the computer. A couple things he talks about: get a good desk and get a good chair. I think that's pretty great advice. I finally bought a decent desk chair this year because I was dealing with a lot of severe back pain. Yep, exactly. The chair that I got is this crazy looking chair, kind of built for standing desks. I actually got it from Fully, the company that makes the used to be Jarvis by Ergo Depot, I guess is the company that used to be. Jarvis is still the standing desk. That's the one that I use. But they sell these crazy chairs that you can sit in a bunch of different ways that are kind of made for these desks too. And it does look like a thumb from Spy Kids. But I kind of wish that I had followed that advice before this year. I've heard it before, but I don't think I took it very seriously. And so I don't mind him saying at the very beginning, hey, trust me, you really want a really good chair. Yeah, the computer advice isn't that great. He talks about buying a dozen pens. Well, check, did that. Although he says get the same ballpoint pen, which I disagree with. He even calls out those fancy fountain pens that you've had for years and you're never going to use. I'm like, Balderdash and Poppycock. I use them every day.
In use.
Yep.
Side note, I've got my oldest started on her fountain pen collection.
I saw that. That's awesome.
So she
and
got
a
her
bullet
first.
journal.
Yep. So she has a Lamy Safari now. So yeah, great fun.
So that's
anyway,
that's the hardware side. I do think there's one other thing in this section though before we get to the software, because he talks about the process day 1, day 2, and very specifically this is exactly what you do over the weekend as you get your system set up, and then Monday you just work the system and you feel a lot better because you don't have all this stress because you have this awesome system. But at one of those call out boxes that he has throughout the book, there's one on culling digital notes. What do you think about this?
It's a pretty common thing for people to collect a whole bunch of stuff that's unnecessary. As far as, I would recommend culling files on a regular basis. I do that, like files that are from things that have been uploaded that if I ever need, I can go download again. Like that sort of thing I'll get rid of on a regular basis. But culling notes seems odd to me. Like if I'm culling notes, I'm culling a potential article that I'm half written, that I have half written. Like that's what I would be culling, or deleting a outline for an upcoming webinar. That's what I would end up deleting if I wouldn't be upcoming, but it would be from a webinar that was done 6 months ago. But I'm not going to get rid of that because I sometimes reference those for upcoming things. I don't know. I feel like that's a bad idea to get rid of those.
All right. That's the response I thought you were going to have. Funky Mosquito's talking about Tiago Forte's Para system. That's instantly what I thought of when I read this too. Not Para specifically, but he talks about different levels of personal knowledge management. And I don't personally do it Tiago Forte's way, but I think this makes a lot of sense. You capture text that you want to recall, and then you bold certain things so that they jump off. And then as you go through and you review those things, then you highlight them. And you have like these different levels of culling that information down to a couple essential pieces. And I think that's very valuable. I think that's what makes a Zettelkasten or a personal knowledge management system work. And I feel like just dumping everything in it is a quick way to make it not work.
Yeah.
So I do think that it's a good idea to call your digital notes. I don't know if I would call them like delete certain things, but you do want to kind of distill things down into the core essence. And those are the things that you want to link together. So I just thought it was interesting that he pointed this out, because I'm sure that he's not doing this at all like I interpreted culling your digital notes.
Right.
But I also think that he's kind of onto something here, even if it is accidentally.
Yeah, that's fair. I kind of wondered if the notes he's taking are things like call Susan on Wednesday.
Yeah, could be.
Well, yeah, you would delete that. I kind of wondered about some things like that, but I don't know. It just seemed really odd. The things that are in my notes bank I would have problems if I deleted any of them.
Sure.
So I don't foresee that.
Yeah, and I guess the thing that I'm talking about with culling is not deleting them, but over time, those notes that are in your notes bank, some of them are worthwhile having at your fingertips to recall. Some of them are destined for the archive box that he's talking about. And so what is the system that you have? I'm speaking generally here, dear listener, the system that you have, what sort of system do you have where you can kind of discard the stuff that isn't worth keeping right there and still being able to reference those things that are relevant at any given point? I think there's ways that you can do that. I don't think it happens by default, though.
Yeah.
No matter which app or system you use.
Well, I don't know. Mine kind of happens by default because I don't ever move things out of that folder, but my tools that I use on top of that notes folder sort by last opened at the top.
Sure.
So the ones that I haven't opened in years are at the bottom of that list and I never see them.
Yep. So you
if I
don't
ever need them, I can search for them. But
exactly, but they're not going to surface. Next time you write an article about bullet journal, you're not going to see, oh, I wrote this thing 2 years ago that's still relevant and I should link to this from the article that I am writing now necessarily.
But I would.
How would you guarantee that that happens?
Because whenever I'm pulling up the article to work on, I search for bullet journal and it pulls up everything I've ever written that contains the words bullet journal in it.
Sure. Okay. So you're doing it manually.
I guess kind of, but I've always operated based on search. And I've gotten to the point where, like, if I'm going to try to find, or if I'm pulling up something to work on it, I generally pull it up by keyword.
Yep.
Which by default shows me all the stuff that is connected to it, just based on that keyword.
So that previous article that you wrote, then, how do you know what's the relevant piece from that, the big takeaway? I guess that's kind of what I'm viewing as culling, is like, if you had a way, maybe you organize your articles with a hierarchy and you've got different level headers for the different sections that you can quickly glance at. But, you don't want to have to go reread a 2,000-word article every time it shows up in your search results in order to locate the core idea there.
I don't know. It just kind of works.
That's kind of what I think he's getting at with this whole idea of like culling your digital notes.
Sure.
Is it's making sure that the relevant stuff pops up when you need it, which you can absolutely do the way that you're doing it. I don't think that there's any one right way to collect and manage these ideas other than to pay attention to how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Because
my tendency is, like, whenever I see the titles of these notes, my brain triggers on what they are. And I generally know which ones I want if I'm going to reference them elsewhere. And that is really all I ever need. Like, if it was going to take a lot longer to create or to find, it's not worth linking in that case. But if I have to create links to things in any form, when I'm making it, I just won't. It takes too long.
I agree with you.
I move too fast for that.
Yeah, that's why wiki style linking is never going to work for me. But backlinks will.
Sure. I follow you. All right, we need to talk about software. We can maybe skip gadgets because he's just telling you to get an external battery.
That was a pretty awful section.
It was pretty awful. It's like, I just skipped this. But he walks through what his recommended apps are. And it's pretty straightforward. He uses Calendar on his Mac and iPhone. He uses Things, which we've talked about.
Yep.
He uses Numbers. And then he uses Time Machine. Does he use a... I don't think he uses a cloud-based...
I think he mentioned he uses Backblaze, and also he mentions Crash Plan.
Does he mention Backblaze? I don't see it here. I thought it was in here. Carbon Copy Cloner.
Yep, and Super Duper. He mentions those.
And Super Duper.
And then on the next page...
Cloud Backup.
Yep.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah, so he does reference like some of the Dropbox, iCloud, OneDrive stuff. But yeah, he does go into Backblaze and Crash Plan and stuff. What else has he got in here? Archiving. He's a big Scrivener fan for the actual writing. But then he gets into like, what does he use for voice chat? What does he use for like, character finders and text snippets and stuff? I was like, okay, great. These are cool things. Launchers. He talks about how he's a Quicksilver fan. And I'm like, what? That is still around?
It is still around, but that's not the one you want to admit that you use.
No. 1Password. What is his
Actually,
PDF thing?
Otter, he does not listen to MPU. He makes a bunch of garbage recommendations. Can I just real quickly point out all the places he's wrong with these recommendations?
Sure. Just real quick. So he's using, for PDFs, he uses PDF Pen.
Which is fine. Yeah.
He uses ViewScan for a scanner driver.
No.
He uses pCalc. He uses the web version of Gmail. He uses TripIt for traveling.
Yep. TripIt's a good
That's his
app.
bank of stuff. Flight Tracker is what he uses for flights and stuff. My point here is that, and then I'll let you tell us where he's wrong, but this is all pretty basic, and it's going to be outdated very quickly.
Especially the way that he wrote it.
Yeah, it's a concern to me that like this is not designed to be valid in 5 years. This is like good for maybe a year, maybe 2. But I would even argue, and you're probably about to explain it to us, that a lot of the software he's talking about here, which is valid for 2020, he wrote this in 2020, I think is out of date even for now.
Exactly.
So,
anytime you make app recommendations, by the time you hit publish, it's out of date.
Yeah.
Trust me, I know. This is what I do for a living. So the one piece of advice that's worth following here is under writing software, because he is a writer and he says don't use Word. I 100% agree with that. He uses Scrivener. That's not the one I would recommend people use. There's lots of good, like, minimal writing apps which don't have all the bells and whistles, so you can focus on the words, which is really what people should be doing, I think, when they are looking for writing software. I've used Ulysses forever. Lately, I've been using BB Edit because I like having the text files. I finally got annoyed with the way Ulysses handles Markdown, and with the images specifically, it's just annoying because I'm updating app pics that are already on the website. So I'm taking that pure Markdown and I'm pasting it into Ulysses, and then I got to clean it all up because Ulysses doesn't even know what to do with the standard Markdown that I pasted in there. It's just it was a pain in the butt. So
with BB Edit, are you opening up individual files?
Yep.
Individual you need to look at Multi-Markdown Composer.
Possibly.
Because it's what I use for it, but it is brilliant with Markdown because it's, built for Markdown.
Yep. I'll take a look at that, but I'm really happy with BB Edit. I just want to mess with your systems, that's all. Yeah. If you need individual files, BB Edit or IA Writer is a great option for just standard Markdown. Ulysses is also a very good editor, but recognize that it's going to be cloud-based and you're going to have these sheets and it's not going to be an individual file, and you're going to run into copy-paste issues with standard Markdown like I am. When it comes to note-taking, these recommendations, again, are old and garbage. The Notes app is okay. But it's like number 10 on my list, I think, ones I'd recommend. He also lists OneNote, Simple Note, and Google Keep. The only thing decent in that list is Simple Note, but even that, use NVAlt, NV Ultra, or Drafts. Or even something like Bear is honestly better. The Notes app, I don't know. I guess I'm so used to doing everything Markdown-wise, but I just feel the Notes app is pretty limited. And I know, like, a lot of people swear by it and it syncs between all your devices, but when it comes to writing, really what you want is like plain text. You don't want rich text, PDFs, all that kind of stuff. Google Keep, you know what? I'm not that familiar with Google Keep, so I can't say anything bad about Google Keep other than my default is not to use Google Apps because I don't want them looking at everything that I write. So
they don't read anything.
That's the only thing I'll say about that. Calendar, he does list the right calendar apps here, in my opinion, but he spells Fantastical wrong. Out of these that are listed, I use BusyCal, and I do that because it's not a $40 per year subscription, and I don't need a bunch of calendar stuff on my iOS device. Task managers, he mentions things. He doesn't mention OmniFocus in this section, which he should have, because that's the other one for Mac users specifically that I would recommend you look at. Trello's decent. Wunderlist, I don't even think that's a thing anymore. I know it was bought by Microsoft. I think it
killed it.
Yeah. Todoist is decent. There's lots of other task managers, though, that are relevant. TickTick is another one that I would probably recommend people look at. But
this is the problem, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You shouldn't be putting this in a printed book. Like, this is a blog post that you reference and then you keep up to date.
Yep.
That's the problem with this, because again, there's so much software he's talking about here, and we could go on all day for like all the things he's doing wrong with it.
One other thing that he is absolutely doing wrong, though, is he's listing Typinator above Text Expander. Absolutely not. Just use Text Expander. If you don't want to pay for something, then use text expansion inside of something like Alfred. But no way. I mean, I went down this exact same product path. I had Typinator first. Text Expander is way better, though.
Yeah. People complain about Text Expander with its subscription and stuff, but it's a no-brainer to me. Like, the things I do with Text Expander, just, it amazes me what I can pull off with it. So anyway, hardware, software, the gadgets. I wish he hadn't put this in there. Like they're saying, like Mosquito saying in the chat, like it kind of feels like padding. I kind of feel like this is one of those situations where he loves this stuff and just wants to talk about it. So he decided to write a chapter about it. And I wish he hadn't. Like that's my concern with it.
I actually think I have not talked to Antony Johnston, so I don't know if this is true or not, but I think he probably does not want to talk about this stuff, but he knows that people are going to ask him. So he wrote it down, so he has a place to point people, would be my guess.
Yeah. And he puts it in his book, that way you have to buy the book to get it.
Yeah.
Anyway, conclusion here at the end of it is like a 2-pager, because he had to wrap up the book and summarize.
This is the only other place the fasten system comes back.
Yes. And I totally forgot about it again until now. But yeah, he does go all the way back to the beginning and mention fasten very, very briefly. But then he concludes the book. Anything else you want to say about it?
And then he says, go read it again.
Yes. All right, so action items here, Mike. I have one. I'm done with it already, actually. When we were talking about, he was walking through like all of the calendaring pieces, and I was looking at that, was looking at the job sheets, was looking at all of the stuff, like how he manages the checklists and stuff for where a project is in the process. And it occurred to me as like, yes, but the one thing I really want, he actually never mentions this in the book, but I really wanted some form of a Kanban for the the content projects I have going on, which I keep in OmniFocus. Like, yes, I'm everything in my bullet journal, but like the checklists of what it takes to write an article and all the places I got to post it and all of the communications that go out around it, I lose track of all that stuff. So it's just templated checklists and OmniFocus, and I use that as kind of a content calendar. But I put together a system based on some of Omni Group's Kanban thing on their Omni automation site, and I tweaked it to run on projects instead of tasks.
Nice.
Because it's what I do. So I'm in the process of trying to figure out how to release that. But I've built a Kanban system for managing those projects in OmniFocus. So I'm already done with it. So I have an action item, and I'm done. So next time, the only follow-up I may have is just, here's where you can go get it.
Exactly. That is your action item for next time. Make it public.
That's fair. All right, what's yours?
All right, so my action item is to make morning time my writing time. I already talked about this. Not time specific not time specific per day. Like every single day I'm going to write for 2 hours before I do anything else. And also, it's going to vary from day to day. And also, I'm not going to have a specific writing goal of X number of words like he's talking about. But the basic principle of writing first thing, that's going to be what I'm going to try to do.
Good luck with that. I hope it goes well.
Hey, thanks.
All right, as for style and rating, I have to say, like, he's a good writer. Obviously.
Would you say he's an organized writer?
It sounds like he's at least attempted to put systems together. So in that sense, yes. I think he is organized for him. And this is an exposition on his system, which I don't argue with. And this is some of what I do. Like whenever I share things, I always say, this is what I have found that works for me.
In my experience.
Yep. This is what I have found that works. And I'm sharing it with you with the caveat that this is my system, so that maybe some of this could be used for your system, knowing that yours likely needs to be very different than what I have. But I'm hoping that one or two things in what I'm doing could be helpful to you and help you to build your system better.
But Some Assembly Required doesn't sell books, Joe.
It doesn't. And I kind of got the impression from this one that he was trying to come up with a new GTD of sorts. But he never called it that. But the format and the layout of what he's doing here is very similar to getting things done. It does have that feel. Obviously, some form of an homage to David Allen and Merlin Mann of sorts. But I think I struggled with this one a lot. Probably more than I should have. I think if you are a long-form writer and you are all over the place and you struggle to keep track of things, this is up your alley. You want this, I think. Because this could be a really good intro to all the things that you and I live and breathe every day, considering how much is in it. And if you think about the number of people who are not even aware that they can use something other than Outlook for email. Like I work with those people, like they see my email system. I use MailMate and like, wait, what is that? It's like, it's MailMate. It's what I use for my email. You can use something other than Outlook. Like I get my Outlook mail all the time. It's like, there's Outlook mail doesn't exist. Never mind. Like, so yes, working with folks who come from that side of things, I get why he's making recommendations like that. If you have that background, this makes sense. I think if you have read any and all of the types of books that we read and you are familiar with the productivity space, I think this is potentially I don't want to say harmful, but it's not worth your time. I don't think. I think it's interesting to have some of the motivation that comes with it. I mean, anytime you read something like this, it always motivates you to do some new things. So for that, I'm grateful. But the one action item I had was like from a conglomeration of places from his book. It wasn't a specific point where I said, yes, that is a thing I want to do. I didn't have any of those. So in that sense, I don't know what to do with it. But again, the style of it, super easy to read. I think they laid it out fairly well. The changing size of chapters, like we talked about, is a little odd. The call-out boxes are kind of helpful, where he calls out a specific point or explains a specific term, gives us the background of where something came from. Those are kind of interesting. As far as how to rate it, knowing that this is trying to fit itself into a productivity book of sorts, and knowing kind of how he intends this to come across, I kind of just disagree with it from his intentions somewhat. I get why people love it. I'm going to put this at a 3.0 because I feel like it needs to be somewhere in the middle of the road, because there are some people this could be good for, but there are a lot of people I think this could be not helpful to. I would probably recommend a few other books before I got to this one, unless you are specifically either a full-time writer or very close to. So all of that said, I'm going to go with a 3.
All right. I'm going to join you at 3.0. I think there's a couple of interesting tidbits in here that I teased out, but the majority of it is a weak system wrapped in a well-written explanation. I think GTD for writers is spot on in terms of what he's trying to do here. And I think that you could, if you are a full-time writer, follow this step by step and do pretty well with it. But that being said, as I mentioned earlier, I don't think I know anybody who this is tailor-made for. And I know a lot of people who would consider themselves writers. So the fact that you have to kind of make it your own significantly increases the cognitive effort you got to put forth in order to really get something from this. And I agree with you that all of the individual pieces of this that you would apply, there are other places to look for the majority of it that will explain it better and make it easier to implement for people like us.
Sure.
I don't think it's a bad book. I'm glad that we read it, but I also disagree with a lot of the recommendations, which makes me not trust all the other stuff that maybe I would normally agree with. But because he's saying keep your tasks in your email application, and oh, by the way, don't use an email application, I use Gmail on the web. Like, you're losing credibility right there with me. So I don't know. I don't know enough to say don't trust this, but I don't trust this. Is kind of what it comes down to. I do think there's a couple, though, key takeaways from this that are good reminders for me, like the morning writing time, for example. Again, not the first place that I've heard that sort of thing. If it was the first time that you heard that, or get a decent desk chair, stuff like that, it could be those sorts of things. I feel do have the potential to be very influential in terms of how you get your work done, especially for a knowledge worker. You don't have to be a writer to benefit from some of that stuff. And that's
Sure.
where I kind of wish he would have made it a little bit more generic, spoken to a wider audience. I get that, it's called the Organized Writer. That's not what he was going for. But I feel like for the bookworm audience, that sort of approach would have been more valuable.
Very valid. All right. I'll be happy to put this one on the shelf. What's next time, Mike?
Next time is The Great Mental Models, Volume 1 by Rhiannon Baubin. I don't know how to say that name. And Shane Parrish. This is a very beautiful book with a kind of like cloth hard cover that it looks really intriguing, and it talks about a lot of concepts that we have come across before, but I think this will be a fun discussion type book. The book itself, by the way, Josh showed me his. It came,
Yep, I saw
and
this
the pages were printed upside down. I was like, what in the world?
I saw that.
So if you are going to order it off of Amazon, make sure you check your page printing, I guess.
Yep.
But this one has been recommended for a while, and I've wanted to read this for a long time, but I also want the physical books. And for a long time, you could not buy the physical book for this. They must have just printed a bunch of new ones, and some of them they printed upside down. Mine is not upside down, thankfully.
Mine's not either. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So, yeah, I'm excited to go through this one.
Yeah, I think that'll be a fun one. Following that is Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke. This is a book that came up on one of my live streams here recently, and it was with Josh as well, about thinking about in percentages of sorts. Like, is this 70% that it's true, or is it 40% that it's true? And if it's 40% versus 70%, how do you act on that? So anyway, I think it'll be kind of an interesting one to go through.
I do not have any Gap books. Do you?
I don't. I keep thinking I will, but let's be honest. So I do not.
Let's be honest.
That said, thank you to everybody who has tuned in to the live stream, joined us in the chat. Obviously, if you are listening to this, you can kind of see how it impacts what we're talking about. But we're also extremely grateful to those of you who are a part of our memberships at bookworm.fm/membership and giving us $5 a month to help keep the show on the air and helping to pay some of those hosting fees and such, pick up our books for us here and there. So we are grateful for that. And when I say that, I should also point out that if you do join that membership program, that it's not just that stuff that you're paying for. You also get some extras, like some really cool wallpaper that Mike put together. It's super high res for the Bookworm logo and such. So there's that. There's some old Gap Book episodes that I've recorded. Mike's MindNode files have gone up there. If that is all of interest to you, again, bookworm.fm/membership. And we're super grateful to those of you who do that.
All right, so thanks everybody for hanging out with us. If you are reading along, pick up The Great Mental Models, Volume 1, and we will talk to you in a couple of weeks.